When Jesus was born, wise men from the east came. My brother Mike, being the wise man that he is, said, you know where Ishmael's folks went whenever they left? They went off to the east. It's probably some of them that were looking for a Messiah. And they came back and they found the Messiah and they went on in a different direction. But they came a long way looking for something, searching something. When Jesus came to Philip, to Peter and Andrew and James and John, and Andrew went to Peter and he said, we found the Messiah, the one whom we've been searching for. When something's important to you, you search for it. When somebody is important to you, you learn about them and you figure out what's going on with them. This individual, the Queen of Sheba says, is important. He's important because everything that goes on in the whole world at that time, whatever the known part of the world was, revolves through him. It goes through his territory. It goes through his part of the world. And she brought all kinds of stuff with her. Camels, spices, gold, precious stones. And she came to Solomon. She spoke with him about all that was in her heart. Have you ever had a question in your heart that you just wanted an answer for? You just really wanted an answer for it. Bible question, and you say, well, I can't find that in my Bible. Where is it at? You ask Brother Charles or Mike or Lomax or Will or somebody. You ask them, where's this found at? And eventually you find something that's similar to it, and it's not exactly what you were thinking, but it tells the truth. It tells it exactly like it was. On the other hand, sometimes you want to know something and you look it up and you find it, and it is exactly like what it's supposed to be. Even greater than what you thought it was going to be. It's one of those things that exceeds expectations. And that's a good thing. Especially to somebody, and I relate to things that I like, but when you go to a place and you hear about it, and you hear about it, it's a really good place to eat, and they have the best steak anywhere around. The baked potatoes are just wonderful, and it's got that little chunky sea salt stuff stuck on the sides of it, and it's just perfect. The butter just melts on it. I mean, it's wonderful. Salads are cool and crispy, and the salad dressing's perfect, and the tea's just right. And you go there and you expect something. What do you expect? I expect it to be the best meal I've ever had in my whole life. Best, juiciest, tender steak, good flavor, potato to be just what it said, and that salt, I can taste it with that butter. Yeah, I mean, just perfect. The salad is just crispy cold. It's just bright. It's just exactly right. Fresh. Everything's wonderful. And you get there, and the salad is a little late coming out, and it's soggy and it's warm. And you get there, and your meal comes out, and the steak is hard to saw into, so you know it's not going to be juicy. It's not going to be that tender piece of meat that you want. The baked potato is cold, so it's not going to even melt the butter. Disappointment. And you can see it. You know it. It's not what you expected. And you're not willing to go back or to give it a good recommendation. In God's Word, everything is perfect. Everything is exactly, it meets and exceeds expectation, and that's what's happening here with the Queen of Sheba. She's gone to this place and she's heard about it, and she asked him questions, things she wants to know, things that have been on her mind. She knows that she's going to make this trip, so she's probably even got some of her really smart people in her part of the world to write down some questions for her, some hard questions for her, even things that she hasn't thought about. He answered all her questions, and there was nothing so difficult for Solomon that he could not explain it to her. Now that takes some effort, but Solomon wasn't taking credit for it. Solomon wasn't saying, look how great I am. Solomon wasn't saying, look how great my mind is, or my wisdom is, or my strength is. When the Queen of Sheba had seen all the wisdom of Solomon and the house that he had built, the food on his table, the seating of his servants, the service of his waiters and their apparel, his cupbearers and their apparel, and his entryway by which he went up to the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. Now there's a telling sign there in that last statement, no more spirit in her. What do you think her intention were when she went? What do you think she really thought deep down when she went to see Solomon, made that 1,200-mile trip? He can't be as good as what he says he is. She's a female leader of a country, very, very famous. And she's thinking that he just thinks a lot of himself. He's put himself up on a pedestal. He's spread this word out there, and it can't be as good as what he says it is. There was no more spirit in her. In other words, she had humbled herself. She's found somebody smarter. There's a smarter person in the room than she is. She's found somebody who's got something that she does not have, and that's the power of the Lord. The Lord is on Solomon's side. She said to the king, "It was a true report which I heard in my own land about your words and your wisdom. However, I did not believe their words until I came and saw it with my own eyes. And indeed, the half of the greatness of your wisdom was not told to me. You exceed the fame of which I heard." The half of it not even told. It's great. What do you think impressed her first and foremost? Well, she spoke with him. She realized pretty quick after speaking with him, he's a really smart dude. I mean, he is smart. Not only is he smart, but he's not arrogant. Not arrogant that thinks that this smartness is mine. This smartness is from God. It comes from him above. I am a servant of the Lord. I serve his people. And she saw that. She saw what kind of a leader Solomon is by looking at his servants. The way they were dressed, the way they presented themselves, the way they surrounded his table, the way they were fed, the way they acted. She said, we have dignitaries. We have the top of our country who don't act like that. And these are servants. And she was impressed with all of those things. Happy are your men, and happy are these your servants, who stand continually before you and hear your wisdom. What kind of country would it be if our leadership lived this kind of life? A life of compassion, a life of love, a life of sharing, a life where they wanted everything best for everybody else, even the servants. They wanted everybody to have their heart's desire as long as it was in accordance to God's will. There's coming a day we're going to be in that country. Right, Brother Matt? Be like paradise. It's going to be heaven in it. And that's what we're searching for. We're searching for that country whose builder and maker is God. Not to multiply to yourselves wives. And yet Solomon did that. We can't understand how he could go from being so wise and being the truest, the wisest man who's ever been alive until Jesus, and then does things that don't make sense. Don't multiply to yourself silver and gold. Blessed be the Lord your God, who delighted in you. And this is the Queen of Sheba speaking about and to Solomon in verse 8. Blessed be the Lord your God, who delighted in you, setting you on his throne to be king of the Lord your God, because your God has loved Israel to establish them forever. Therefore he made you king over them to do justice and righteousness. The Queen of Sheba had studied the Israelites before she came. She knew about their worship. She knew about their God. She knew about their king. And she knew what their king had said about himself. I'm just a king over God's people. God is the true king. I'm just the physical king over these people on earth. God is ruling in heaven above. And because of that attitude that Solomon had, God delighted in Solomon. She could see the delight that God had in Solomon. She saw it with her own eyes, evidence, proof. She saw the wealth. She saw the happiness. She saw the buildings. She saw going from his house that it took 13 years to build to the temple that it took 7 years to build, a walkway that led from Solomon's house, the king of Israel, to the house of the Lord. Significant about that? Solomon knew he was supposed to be in the house of the Lord. He knew he was a servant of God. He knew he was supposed to be faithful to God, and he was supposed to do what God said all the days of his life. He made you king over them to do justice and righteousness. Now she sees that, and this is fairly early on in his reign, and she realizes about this. All the gifts she brings in. She gave the king 120 talents of gold, spices in abundance, precious stones. There never were any spices such as those the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. So they were valuable things that she gave him. They were numerous things that she gave him. They were superior in quality, the things that she gave him. You don't take the leftovers and give to somebody that you're trying to impress. You take the first, the best. And you know what God told the children of Israel through Moses? I want your best. I want your first fruits. I want the very best that you have. And if you'll give me the very best that you have, if you'll give me your first fruits, I'll bless you beyond measure. I'll bless you so much that you can't outgive me. That's what he told them in Malachi. You take your little shovel and you just shovel it on, I'll multiply it back at you. I'll just keep giving it to the point where you will believe what I say. She said also the servants of Hiram and the servants of Solomon who brought a gold and from Ophir, brought algum wood and precious stones. All of these kings and kingdoms round about were bringing things to Solomon and to his kingdom. The king made walkways of algum wood for the house of the Lord in the king's house, also harps and stringed instruments for singers, and there were none such as these seen before in the land of Judah. Now King Solomon gave to the Queen of Sheba all she desired. Now, what was the first thing she desired? Just to have a meeting with him, just to be in attendance with him, just to hear what he had to say, to test and to prove to herself that he is what everybody has said he was. She got that opportunity. He answered every single question, did not have one thing that he could not tell her, that he could not explain to her. Gave her all that she desired intellectually. Then, because of the wisdom of Solomon and because of his comfort that he had with his people and all the people being so happy and so blessed, she believed in God. She believed in the king that reigned in heaven above. And that's what meant the most to God and to Solomon, was that she was now a true believer of the God that Solomon serves. Whatever she asked, much more than she had brought to the king. Now, she had brought some valuable stuff to the king. She had brought some quality stuff, the best that they had, but much more than she had brought to the king. So she turned and went to her own country, she and her servants. If you had to guess, and it would simply be a guess, what would you think that her trip home and after she got home would be like? You know people well enough to know that they're going to talk about the things that they've seen. You go on a trip to wherever it is, and you just love that trip. That was the best trip ever. It was the best location I've ever been to. It was the prettiest mountains or beach or whatever it was. It was the clearest water I've ever seen. The accommodations were perfect. The food was great. The people were just so friendly and so nice, and it cost less than what I thought it would. Now, what if you told everybody that? Well, they're going to want some of that. They're going to want to go. They're going to share in that. They're going to want to be a part of it. Here she is, and she's gone home now, and she's telling people, I was haughty, I was prideful, I was wrong, I went to make a mockery of him. He was the greatest man I have ever been around in my life. He knew every answer to everything. His people are so happy. Everything is wonderful there. It's like being in paradise. People see that. Now, what about the enemies along the way? 1,200 miles home. They hear this about Solomon. What about the people after they get home? They hear this about Solomon. What does that do for Solomon in his reign? Makes it simple. Makes it easy. If he's that great, we can't touch him. If he's that wonderful, we can't do anything with him. If he's that smart, we can't outsmart him in strategies and battles. The weight of gold that came to Solomon yearly was 666 talents of gold. My Bible was written some time ago, and this one that I use here, and at that time it was worth about $3.8 billion per year. Now, in today's time, it's worth more than that. But that's how much gold he had coming to him on a yearly basis. You say, well, why did he have that gold coming to him? When a king and a kingdom is in charge, they get taxes from other nations. Other nations pay them tribute, pay them tax money not to go and fight them, not to go and destroy them, not to put them into physical labor. They just send them their gold. It's like preluding. You know, they send it so they don't have to come and get people killed to get the money. All this gold. But remember what we read in Deuteronomy 17 and verse 17. Not to multiply to yourselves wives, not to multiply to yourselves gold and silver. And yet here it is, the Lord blessing Solomon and blessing the children of Israel and getting these nations to send all this money and all this tribute to them. It's not the money and it's not the tribute that gets you in trouble. It's your mind that gets you in trouble. It's when you start thinking that you're better than everybody else. It's when you start thinking, I deserve this. It's when you start thinking that I did this to deserve that, or I did this to get that. Besides what the traveling merchants and the traders brought, and all the kings of Arabia and the governors of the country brought gold and silver to Solomon. And King Solomon made 200 large shields of hammered gold. 600 shekels of hammered gold went into each shield. He also made 300 shields of hammered gold. 300 shekels of gold went into each shield. The king put them in the house in the forest of Lebanon. He had so much gold he didn't know what to do with it. He made them into shields, and he put them in a house that he made in the forest in Lebanon. And you say, well, where's all this gold today? Is that real? It was real, and that gold was there. In the beginning, in the Garden of Eden, there's 4 rivers that come together, and in those 4 rivers that come together, one of them is mentioned, and it says that and there was much gold there. Much gold there. Where's all that gold? Well, you look around and you see people that have gold everywhere. There was a commercial on TV some 8 or 9 or 10 years ago, and it was a Russian guy, and it was he was selling some kind of vodka, some kind of alcoholic drink. And he was not an educated person. And he was there and just had all kinds of stuff, the peacocks and the golds and all the stuff, the beautiful girls and all those things. And his part in that commercial was opulence. I don't know what it is, but I think I want it. And opulence is just having all that gold and all that silver and all that, prestige that goes with it. And he didn't recognize that he already had it. And it comes to Solomon because he's faithful to God. It comes to the children of Israel. He talks about here, moreover, the king made a great throne of ivory and overlaid it with pure gold. The throne had 6 steps with a footstool of gold, which were fastened to the throne. There were armrests on either side of the place of the seat, and 2 lions stood beside the armrests. 12 lions stood there, one on each side of the 6 steps. Nothing like this had been made for any other kingdom. It was different. It was special. It was better than anything they had ever seen or ever would see. All of King Solomon's drinking vessels were gold. The vessels of the house in the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. Not one was silver, for this was counted as nothing in the days of Solomon. It's almost like they threw the silver out, and the common people would say, well, that's just silver. I don't want silver. I want gold. And that's how much God blessed them. The king's ships went to Tarshish with the great servants of Hiram. Once every 3 years, the merchant ships came bringing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and monkeys. So King Solomon surpassed all the kings of the earth in riches and wisdom. And all the kings of the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his heart. Each man brought his present, articles of silver, gold, garments, armor, spices, horses, mules, and set at a set rate each year. And Solomon had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots. Remember Deuteronomy 17. Don't multiply to yourselves wives. Don't multiply to yourselves gold and silver. Don't multiply to yourselves horses and chariots. The reason for horses and chariots is that represented strength in battle, military strength. God said, we don't need that. I've got you covered. I'm going to fight your battles for you. You will be victorious as long as you stay faithful and obedient to me. And yet Solomon had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots, 12,000 horsemen whom he stationed in the chariot cities and with the king at Jerusalem. He reigned over all the kings from the river of the land of the Philistines as far as the border of Egypt. He reigned over all of that territory. Now remember, the land of Canaan was from the river Jordan and the mountains of Moab to the sea and to the desert land, and it was contained therein. Now he's covering all the way back to where they came from in Egypt and got all those people under his control. The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones, and he made cedar trees as abundant as the sycamores which are in the lowland. And they brought horses to Solomon from Egypt and from all lands. Never return to Egypt is what God had said in Deuteronomy 17. So you see, he's got wives coming, and he's got chariots, and he's got horses, and he's got gold, and he's got silver, but he's still dependent on the Lord, and he still loves the Lord, and the Lord is blessing him beyond measure. And you say, well, how did they mess it up? Well, he messed it up by turning and looking for something more, for looking for something he could do, for looking for a name for himself. And he said it's all vanity. And he also said in Ecclesiastes 12 and 8, verse 18, I will leave it all to a man who will come after me. Solomon died, left his land to Rehoboam. Rehoboam was a king, one of the sons of Solomon. And in the 5th year of King Shishak of Egypt, he came into the land of Israel, and he looted all the gold and all the silver, took all of those shields that Solomon had made and stored in that building in Lebanon, in the forest of Lebanon, took all the things that they felt were important to them and took them back to the land that God said don't ever go back to. Look at it as Christians. God has taken us out of a world of darkness. He's given us his marvelous light. He's given us all the abundance that we could ever need and ever want in life. And we choose to go back into that darkness. It can happen overnight. It can happen instantly. We can go from the wealthiest of all people on this earth because of spiritual things, because of salvation, and we can turn our back on it in overnight, instantly, and it all be taken away from us. We learn great and valuable lessons from David and from Solomon. I'm like other people, I believe Solomon, I hope he did, came back to his senses and came to himself. In Ecclesiastes, the final writings are there of the words that he put. And the whole of man is to fear God and to keep his commandments. And he finally figured that out. I appreciate so much those lessons. We got new books. If you don't keep your old books, or turn them in. If you need the new books, they're back on that back pew back there. Thank you very much for your